Kang Yeon is jolted awake by the jarring impact of a car accident, and he feels a searing pain in his shoulder. As he tries to move, he realizes that something is wrong. He can't seem to make his limbs respond to his commands. Looking at himself, he catches a glimpse of his reflection, and is in shock in seeing that he seems different. Yeon is confused and disoriented, with no memories of his past or the events leading up to the accident. Despite the efforts of the medical staff, he can't recall anything about himself. A policewoman reveals to him that the car he was driving belongs to a man named Kang Yeon, but he doesn't recognize the name. Despite their best efforts, Yeon cannot remember anything about himself, the accident, or the bullet injury on his shoulder. His past is a blank slate, and he feels lost and alone in the world. While waiting, Yeon notices an apartment room card among his belongings. Then, before the police come back, he escapes from the hospital and goes to an apartment building. As he walks inside an apartment room, he does not notice that the mirror reflection is different from his own. Yeon then discovers that the room belongs to Cheol-ho, which Yeon thought was his identity, not having any memory of his past. But suddenly, a strange phenomenon occurs, causing Yeon to panic as the room's environment around him changes. Amidst the chaos, a few pieces of memories pop up in Yeon's head. However, he cannot relate to the event in his memories or recognize people's faces that appear in his flashback. After that, when Yeon opens his eyes, he finds himself not in an apartment room anymore, but instead now sitting in a crowded restaurant. He hysterically panics as he cannot grasp what has just happened. Yeon runs away from the place. However, when he walks past a glass door, he sees himself now controlling someone else, named Lee. In confusion, he cannot believe what he sees, nor understand what is happening to him. Noticing that the apartment he was in before is not far away, Yeon rushes back to that building. There, he finds Cheol-ho, the person he previously controlled, walking out of the building. Yeon tries to stop him, when a car suddenly runs into Cheol-ho and abducts him. A moment after, Yeon discovers the identity of the body he now controls. He then goes to where Lee works, and meets some employees who recognize Yeon as Lee, confirming that he is truly inside someone else's body. Later that night, Yeon ends up meeting a homeless man he previously encountered. Yeon tells Hengrio that he was the person from the accident. At first, Hengrio hardly believes Yeon's words. However, Yeon recalls the detail of their first meeting and explains that his consciousness suddenly transferred to someone else's body, resulting in him controlling other people. Hengrio asks who Yeon is, if the person he is controlling is not his real identity, but Yeon cannot answer, as he does not remember his own identity. Hengrio then gives Yeon a piece of advice on where to start searching for the answer. He tells him to start from the beginning. Amidst their conversation, the environment shifts once again, and now Yeon finds himself controlling a man called Park, who is sitting in the middle of a criminal interrogation. From then on, he notices that he switches bodies randomly every 12 hours. Then, Yeon decides to follow Hengrio's advice. He begins by trying to get clues from the wreckage of the car he was in during the accident. Inside the car, he finds a photo of a girl named Ji-na, who previously appeared in his memories. With the clue from the picture, Yeon goes to find Ji-na at a church. When they meet, Ji-na attacks Yeon, as she intends to interrogate Park, the person Yeon controls. Yeon tries to get clues about his identity from her while Ji-na asks about Yeon's whereabouts, not knowing he himself is in that body. However, none of them answer each other's questions. When Ji-na is caught off guard, Yeon snatches her gun. Yeon prompts Ji-na to escape, and later meets with one of Park's henchmen to describe his encounter with Ji-na and get more clues about her relationship with him. The man seems to recognize her and tells Yeon her address. Yeon then sees a man hanging from the ceiling. And watches his clock as 12 hours pass, which makes his consciousness transfer to a man named Yu. Yeon, being Yu, writes down the address of Ji-na on his palm quickly, so he don't forget, then rushes to the address given by the man, and finds out that the place where Lee works is a hideout for a secret organization, and both Lee and Park are members. Their plan is to hunt down Yu, the person Yeon is controlling, and Ji-na, his former agent, and the wife of Yeon, who went missing. As Yeon explores Ji-na's home, his eyes are drawn to the photographs hanging on the walls. In one, he sees himself standing alongside Lee and Yu, all of them smiling in a moment frozen in time. It's then that he realizes that he must be Kang Yeon. The images are proof that he knows Lee and you, and that they know him too. Suddenly, the front door bursts open, and Gina walks in. Yeon quickly ducks behind a nearby piece of furniture, watching in horror as Park's henchmen attack her. Instinct takes over, and he springs into action, expertly taking on the attackers like a trained agent. His movements are fluid and calculated, each strike landing with precision. The henchmen are left confused, as Yeon's skill makes it seem like Yu himself is fighting them. After the chaos settles, Yeon and Gina flee in a car, with the henchmen in hot pursuit. As they speed down the road, Yeon reveals the body-switching phenomenon to Gina, desperate to convince her of his true identity. But she is skeptical, convinced that Yeon is responsible for all the trouble they're in, because he looks like you. Despite Yeon's protests, Gina abruptly exits the car as they manage to escape their followers. The sound of the pursuing henchmen fades into the distance as Yeon watches her leave, unsure of what to do next. Park interrogates his men, because they lost the trail of both Yeon and Gina, and asks to track them down again. Meanwhile, Gina is sitting in the bar with another female agent. Yeon's return to Hengrio is fueled by an intense need to uncover the truth about his identity. He immediately demands that Hengrio hand over the dashcam that was stolen from his car, knowing that it might hold vital clues. Without hesitation, Hengrio leads him to the place where he sold the recorder. The second-hand tech store is a maze of cables and blinking lights, the smell of solder and circuit boards wafting through the air. The owner greets them, but his lack of information about the specific dashcam leaves them with a pile of cards to sift through. Yeon's eyes dart back and forth, searching for any clues that could reveal his past. Finally, he finds the right card, and his heart nearly stops as he watches the footage. The scene unfolds in front of him like a nightmare. Gina is engaged in a fierce battle with Cheol-ho, but the struggle is short-lived. The sound of a gunshot rings out, and Gina falls to the ground. Cheol-ho grabs her and tosses her into the back seat of a waiting car, before speeding away. Yeon feels a surge of anger and desperation. He knows he must find Cheol-ho and confront him about what he's done. Yeon and Hengrio's search for answers is suddenly interrupted by the entrance of a group of men into the tech store. Yeon's quick thinking saves them from being caught, as he slips the card into Hengrio's pocket, before they make a run for it through the dark alleyways. Yeon can feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins as they dart around corners and duck behind dumpsters to avoid being caught. He can hear the pounding of his own heart in his chest, a sound that threatens to give them away at any moment. As they split up, Yeon tells Hengrio to run the other way, while he continues on alone. He can feel the henchman's breath hot on his heels, his heart racing with fear as he tries to outrun them. Suddenly, Yeon's world goes black as he is struck by a truck. But just as quickly, his consciousness shifts to one of the henchmen driving the car, which is in a quest to hunt down Gina. With a fierce determination, Yeon intentionally crashes the car to prevent them from hurting Gina. He can feel the impact of the crash reverberating through his body, but he knows that he has done the right thing. At Park's hideout, Park is interrogating Yu and Hengrio. He orders his henchmen to end Hengrio, but then Yeon arrives, in one of Park's henchmen's bodies. To save Hengrio, Yeon acts as if he will be the one to end him. They escape before Park's subordinate warns him of his partner's strange behavior. Later, Yeon watches the recording from his car dashcam, and finds out that his own body was taken to Yu's hideout by Cheol-ho. At the same time, both Gina and Park also manage to track Yeon's body's whereabouts. Yeon and Hengrio rush to Yu's hideout and find Yeon's unconscious body lying on a bed. As he touches his body, he suddenly remembers everything about his past. In a flashback, Yeon recalls that he used to be an agent who worked with a secretive organization specializing in taking down drug operations. He also used to live a happy life with Gina. One day, Yeon met with Yu, who told him that the organization was corrupted and gave him a piece of evidence to expose other corrupt agents. It turns out that Lee and Park, Yeon's superior, had made a deal with drug dealers to sell the drugs they had confiscated for their own gain. Knowing that Yu had given the evidence to Yeon, Park and Lee abducted Gina, to prevent Yeon from exposing their corruption. As Yeon arrives to save his wife, he is quickly subdued by Park's henchmen, who inject him with Eterex, a new drug that induces a massive illusionary effect, paralyzing him. They plan to frame Yeon as the traitor who shot both Yu and Gina, and then took his own life, to cover Park and Lee's corruption. Just before Yeon is forced to pull the trigger, he suddenly shifts his consciousness to Cheol-ho's body, and shoots Park's men to save Jina. As they attempt to flee, Jina is unaware that it's Yeon controlling Cheol-ho's body. Believing that Cheol-ho is still one of her enemies, she shoots him in the shoulder and runs away. After Jina escaped, Yeon had returned to see his unconscious body and decided to escort it to the doctor at Yu's hideout. After that, the disoriented Yeon, in Cheol-ho's body, accidentally crashed his car while he was looking for Jina. When Yeon woke up, he had lost all his memories prior to the accident. Now, after Yeon remembers everything, he also realizes that he had been controlling almost everyone who was present at the scene where he was betrayed by his superior. Suddenly, a group of armed men shows up surrounding the hideout. Outside, Yeon sees Jina being followed by a group of armed men. Yeon asks Hengrio to escape with his paralyzed body, while he tries to fend off their assailants. Soon after, a shootout occurs, and Yeon tries his best to protect Jina. Amidst the fight, Hengrio successfully escapes with Yeon's body. However, Park's men manage to overwhelm Yeon and capture Jina. Yeon wakes up inside a car that is sinking into a river, with Yu and one of Park's henchmen inside. As the vehicle drowns deeper, Yeon realizes that it is almost the time when his body will change. He then helps the other henchman, who was also present with him. Yeon helps him escape, but he swims off without helping Yeon. However, the clock again hits 12, and Yeon's consciousness is transferred to the henchman as he swims to the surface. Park and Lee hold Jina hostage at Park's hideout, as she also knows about their corruption. However, Lee seems upset with Park, deeming him incompetent. Lee kicks Park's back to vent his anger. Park, crazed by Lee's action, shoots his partner in crime. After that, Park indulges in drugs while taunting Jina. He meets up with his boss and their client from abroad to conduct their drug deal. Yeon shows up at Park's place and defeats his men one by one. As Yeon fights his way to the meeting room, Park gets upset with his boss, who keeps calling him incompetent, just like Lee did before. Agitated by his boss's ranting, Park shoots her and the client. Before Yeon reaches the meeting room, Park pulls Jina by her hair to confront him. He threatens to shoot Jina if Yeon does not surrender. Amidst their encounter, Park realizes that Yeon's consciousness is controlling his henchman's body, and he mocks Yeon as a ghost. When Yeon decides to submit to Park's threat, Park shoots Jina anyway, but she saves herself, forcing Yeon to fight him. As those two fight, Park defeats the heavily wounded Yeon. But suddenly, before Park ends Yeon with a knife, Jina shoots him first. Yeon and Jina finally reunite, after being separated by Park and Lee. However, in Yeon's final moment, he has to say goodbye to his beloved, as his consciousness slowly fades away. After the event, Hengrio saves Yeon's body, which Jina now treats at the hospital, always faithfully waiting for her husband to wake up. Corruption and betrayal will only end in suffering and doom. It is honesty, love, and loyalty that prevail in the end.